So here's how this is going to go, all right? So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and I want to see a show of hands. How many fans of Purview here? For the rest of you, hopefully by the time you leave the thing, it should all work out great. How many of you are worried? There's all this talk about AI and agents, and you're sort of worried like a lot that you're going to start, your enterprises are going to start leaking out confidential data unintentionally. Right? There's a few of you. How many of you are super worried that with this all talk of AI, but maybe your organizations are not prepared with all the regulatory controls that you have to sort of get right given all the AI regulation? There's a few of you, right? You know, there's an amazing amount of talk about all these maker tools. You've got Foundry, you've got Copilot Studio, you've got 3P stuff like from Anthropic and OpenAI. How many of you are worried that the sprawl of AI apps and agents is going to get so crazy that it's going to be very hard to manage? Oh, there's a lot of you. How many of you are worried that while people think about source systems like GitHub as a place where IP, source code is stored, but there's a lot of confidential information being stored in those systems as well that you need to protect? Well, if you raised your hand, you're at the right show, and so you can turn off your TikTok. All right? Rohan Kumar, I'm a part of the Purview team. Welcome to Ignite. Super excited to be here. And the thing I'd sort of start off by saying is, I mean, it's sort of become a cliche right now, but if you look at what's happening in this digital-first world, like security and governance, in some sense, is the baseline for trust. Like without that, really, there is no AI, there is no innovation. The other thing to realize is innovation based on AI is going to drive progress, and that's absolutely going to happen. Right? That's definitely going to happen. And then, having a resilient infrastructure that's built on the foundation of security will drive a lot of transformation. And data in all of this is not just another asset. It is a very, very strategic asset for you. Every decision that your enterprises are making on behalf of your customers, every insight that you're making, every choice, essentially is sort of built on data. And our promise to you, by the way, is not just to be a partner that protects your data, but we are essentially going to sort of build a system for it for you that is essentially going to make you use your data responsibly, right? To sort of really get the value, the decisions you need to make on behalf of your customers to grow your business. So that's our promise. Now, it's some interesting statistics to get started. Did you guys know that 90% of the entire volume of data in the world was produced in the last 2 years? Right? I mean, we've been talking about just the amount of data growth for a long time. So how is this the case, right? It is really because AI is producing a lot of data as well. Now, of course, a lot of that may be just rot, like it may not be useful. But the thing that is important to realize is the scale, the volume is becoming so significant that having that understanding of like, what is this? Like, is it important or not, becomes extremely, extremely critical. Now, as a part of our innovation strategy, we speak to a lot of our data security leaders to understand what's top of mind for them. And here's some interesting things. 73% of the data and AI leaders that we spoke to are investing in some sort of AI specific, obviously just given what their enterprises are doing, some sort of enterprise controls. 82% of them essentially want to understand how to leverage Gen AI as ways in which they can significantly improve their data security practice, like systems and practice. And then 86% of them essentially are very worried that there is so many siloed tools that they have to use. And in this age of AI, collaboration has to get significantly better. So, this whole notion of like unified platforms that are bringing together, breaking down silos across a lot of practitioners is a real thing. So these are some of the things that guide how we think about our product strategy. Now, going beyond that, like what's the urgency around this? One of the interesting things in a lot of conversations I have with customers is they've heard about agents, they've heard about AI, but they're sort of really wondering like, how much of this is real. And here's the statistics, right? 80% of the leaders, when you think about AI agents that have become a great way in which you can augment your practitioners to sort of make them more efficient, they expect, or 80% of the leaders expect to deploy agents in the next 12 to 18 months. 1.3 billion agents are essentially going to be deployed by 2028 across all the enterprises in the world. And about 75% of the people who already use AI are actually going to bring a lot of the tools that make them more efficient. They're going to sort of push the system with their enterprises to make this happen. So this whole problem around securing AI is not just theoretical, it's not some science fiction stuff in the future, it's happening right now and we need to be prepared for it. All right. It's interesting, you look at, there's a lot of existing risks that obviously carry forward with any of the AI systems that we deploy. But some of you may have read the article that Anthropic published a couple of days ago in which they sort of tracked a nation-state attack. And there are a few things that they call out, which is the reasoning of these LLMs, right? In some sense, extracting data, the typical threat actor attack pattern would be they infiltrate some systems, they get a whole bunch of data out, then they spend a lot of time investigating to figure out what to do next, right? There is a lot of latency involved in that. And these LLMs essentially are significantly reducing that time, right? So the volume of analysis of the text is significantly changing, and that fundamentally changes the game, right? So you look at the overall volume of signals that we're trying to capture, the pace at which reasoning around that is happening to determine the next best course of action by the threat actor, that's significantly reduced. So whether it's AI models, MCP servers, a whole bunch of endpoints that are getting created where the risk specifically as it relates to agents and so you got to sort of be prepared for that. Now, stepping back, with that as the frame, just grounding ourselves a little bit. So Purview essentially has always taken a very integrated approach to data security, data governance, and data compliance. And what we mean by that is when you look at things like data discovery, even though each of these functions in an enterprise is handled by a different leader or a different set of practitioners, there's a lot of common elements, what we call the base platform layer, where you do discovery, you understand what your data estate looks like, that's sort of common, and that's essentially how we've built this product suite. The interesting thing as we speak to a lot of our customers with the AI growth, the collaboration across these functions is becoming extremely important. So if you're a data security practitioner, you need to sort of be able to spend a lot of time collaborating with the data compliance leader and the data governance person because, if something gets exfiltrated, there is a lot of collaboration that needs to happen to make sure, if you're a security person, you need to get permissions from, let's say, the data owner who happens to be in the governance space. And how do you ensure that, a lot of those things are moving seamlessly and getting audited for things like compliance, right? So with that as a frame, we're basically sort of anchoring and creating that in our experiences, that huge amount of collaboration between these functions by investing heavily by integrating through the Sentinel platform and the security Copilot. So if you look at data governance, data privacy, data compliance, and data security, the practitioners will be able to work a lot more seamlessly together, right? Exchange ideas, workflows that span these functions are going to get a lot more easier. And I think that unified platform-based approach with Sentinel platform and the security Copilot is essentially going to enable this to happen. The other important part here is the ecosystem. Look, security is a team sport. We've always spoken about that. And you'll see this a little later in the presentation where we are investing heavily in expanding the coverage that we have through a very rich partner ecosystem, right? There are a lot of our partners who've spent a lot of their IP in deeply understanding estates that are beyond what we are able to build in our first-party system. And their integration through the Sentinel platform is increasing the visibility in tools like the Purview DSPM, as you'll notice here in a second. Right. Now, the rest of the presentation is sort of go through a set of chapters, starting with M365. Of course, Purview's bread and butter, the things that gives us the right to sort of expand our reach is M365. And we heard a lot of feedback from all of you in terms of just certain areas of the product like reporting, where there's been a lot of feedback in terms of, hey, look, if I don't have the insights, if I don't understand sort of what's going on in my M365 estate in terms of how many things have been labeled, et cetera, it's hard for me as a data security practitioner sort of to take action. So let's see what's launching at Ignite. We're basically launching a set of very comprehensive reports within our data security posture management. So this is basically where you get a very deep understanding of what you have with M365. And if you double click, you basically have a sense of, as an example, this is just, and you'll see more and more of these insights get added, how many items have been labeled, how many of them are auto-labeled, which will make you curious to understand things like, hey, how's auto-labeling working? Is that important or not? And as you all are very well aware, having that deep understanding of classification of data becomes the first step towards having a great practice in terms of data security, right? So you get information like that. There's more deeper information in terms of, hey, if you look at the set of the auto-labeled items, which sources have they come from? And then of all the policies that you've set, which of them are not enforced, and you have like the single dashboard view where you can now double click and understand, hey, why aren't they being enforced? Is there certain tweaking that needs to happen, et cetera. So again, huge focus on reporting, and we're just getting started. And outside of this, I'd say for M365, we've done, oh, there you go. At least some of the folks are excited, which is great. That sort of makes me feel good. But it's also important to understand, we always invest in things like resiliency. We've heard feedback around, like our DLP for the endpoint, our DLP for the cloud. If you look at the policy, framework and the resiliency around that, we're just doing a ton of work, of course, to make that happen. And thank you for all the feedback that we're getting from our customers there. Moving forward, how many of you are excited about Agent 365 that you heard this morning? Right? So again, two big things when you look at Agent 365. One's about manageability. So this is like the IT function, you sort of manage all the agents that you have. And the other thing is around security, right? Like how do you secure these agents and sort of built in? And Purview has been very deeply involved with Agent 365 from the very beginning, because it's interesting when you talk about securing AI, the most important asset is data. So Purview lands are becoming very, very critical. Now, just all up, if you look at Agent 365, one of the key principles we had was, while agents, like I called out, there's a whole new set of risks that come with agents. The approach we've taken is, how do we make it very incremental for our customers who've already done a ton of investment in protecting data with users in mind, right? And then you'll see some of this stuff later on in the deck where, where there's a lot of dynamics around volume of data you're dealing with in your audit log, as an example. Those things fundamentally change just because the agents are able to interact a lot quicker. But can you carry forward a lot of the investments and the concepts that our customers understand, and can we reduce the burden? That's sort of been a key part of our product strategy as we've approached this. I'll give you an example, right? Now, as a part of Agent 365, the promise really is agents are going to be a part of your workforce. So just imagine there's an agent in your team, and then there's a team member that's sort of interacting with it. Here we have the Java procurement agent. And the team members essentially sent a few confidential documents and said, hey, can you sort of summarize this for me? And based on the policy that you have established in the enterprise, this cannot be done. Like, you don't want the Copilots or the AI apps to be actually looking at this highly confidential data. Now, this might seem, hey, we already have this. Now, our answer is true, but this is really where you have a human interacting with an agent, sort of running into the same sort of block that two humans would run into. And eventually, when we have agent-to-agent communication, like that is going to happen, right? They essentially follow. So this is an example of how very similar to the protections that you're used to today sort of carry forward. The same thing. One of the design thesis we had as we were going into thinking about Agent ID in Entra was, what should the default permissions be? Because today when you sort of go create a user in the enterprise, they get a whole bunch of permissions around being able to create content in M365, sending email, sharing content, and this and that. But with agents, we are taking a very restrictive approach, right? So as an example, an organization might decide, look, I don't want the agents to send any emails outside the organization, which was the case in this example that I'm showing. And that's essentially what happened. When the agent, for whatever reason, tried to send an email to an external customer or partner, that thing was blocked. Again, Purview's protection working in line exactly as you expect it to, but with agents, right? A couple of examples. The other thing we've done with Agent 365 is invest heavily in AI observability. So in DSPM, you get a very, very comprehensive and deep understanding of all the agents that exist in your enterprise. And by the way, these are not just Microsoft's first-party agents that are, have an Entra ID, but literally any agents you may have built out on some other vendor's stack, as long as they get registered with us, we basically have visibility. Like in this case, you see the bird's eye view is the total number of agents, how many are active, how many are inactive based on a certain definition that the customer's configured, how many of them are high risk based on the activity. Now, for those of you who maybe are thinking a little ahead, you start mapping insider risk in your mind, like how do you think about user activity that defines whether a user is risky or not? Very similar concepts carry forward to agents. And then, like, how many of them have had how many of these agents by themselves have had interactions with sensitive data? So you get this bird's eye view, because based on this insight, that'll drive the next course of maybe gathering more information or taking a course of actions. So in this case, again, in DSPM, like I said, these are not just Microsoft first-party agents, but you see an agent from Salesforce as an example, right? I mean, it's a very popular CRM system, and they're basically sort of being into agents as well. So you want to sort of track that. get given a lot of our customers. And this is not just with one vendor. Like our real vision over here is DSPM needs to become this one-stop shop for you to have a very comprehensive understanding of all the agents. Now let's move into insider risk, right? This is an example which I think the team has done a fantastic job of really modeling and looking at, hey, today how do our customers think about insider risk? How do the experiences show up inside IRM? And how do we sort of carry forward the same thing with agents, right? So what you see here is the 𝗲𝗲 procurement agent essentially has been declared a high-risk one, as you may have noticed in the previous slide. And why was it declared high risk? Because it accessed sensitive files from SharePoint. And by the way, it sort of had an exfiltration attempt. So this is all this stuff, all this activity on behalf of this agent gets logged, and you have a very deep understanding of what that happened. And one of the other things that we show as a part of IRM for agents is this notion of an agent activity scatter plot, right? So essentially, you have like this bird's eye view of, from a timeline standpoint, what did the agent do in terms of activities? And here, as you can imagine, the stuff that's highlighted were the two activities that really increase the risk score of that agent, which you can map back to specifically what they did. Again, looking at the investments that you've already made, you already understand workflows around insider risk, and how do we sort of extend that to agents? Extremely important, right? And then finally, you saw the information worker users view in terms of how, when they are interacting with agents, how the purview protection kicks in. You saw the IRM admin, the compliance admin, the security admin's view of like how they are able to get details of why certain agents are being marked as being risky, along with having a pretty comprehensive view. Now you put yourself in the shoes of the IT admin. Remember, like, this is the whole idea behind Agent 365 is you have the IT admin and working very closely with the security admins, in this case, data security LAN. So they get a view inside the MAC, which is the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, where, hey, what's the activity of monitoring agents? Like, how are we protecting sensitive data? Just to sort of give them at ease of like, hey, while they're not directly responsible for security, they at least feel confident based on the view that we're showing inside the MAC that, hey, Purview is protecting your agents. And of course, if they start seeing certain things over there that show that there is a certain amount of risk, then they can always partner with the security leaders or the data security leaders to go solve for that. So it's the user, the data security admin, and the IT admin working in collaboration to ensure that your agents are secured, your data is secured from your agents. That's really the vision that we're executing on. All right, now with that as the background, how many of you sort of think Purview is just for M365? Oh, this is amazing. Nobody. Oh, at least there's one person. Thank you for being the exception to the rule here. Yeah, look, for the last 2 years, the team has done a fantastic job. And if you look at the coverage, right, like the investments that you've done in protecting M365, how do those extend to protect everything in your data estate? Like, that's really the short of the vision. So here, as you see, the frame that we have is you have the Microsoft Copilots, the most popular one being M365 Copilot in chat, of course. This Copilot is coming from Fabric, Security Copilot. You look at developer-built AI. We have maker platforms in Copilot Studio, GitHub, and AI Foundry. So anything that's get built on it, and I'll tell you, what has been our product thesis over there. And of course, the third-party AI. This is really where we are leaning into the browser, the enterprise edge browser, and the network DLP protection to provide enough context there, where we sort of integrate with a lot of our partners. This is a good example of how we are betting on the partner ecosystem to essentially leverage, the Purview policies. Thank you for the Purview policies that we have to essentially protect your data on the network itself. It's a really good example. So that's the third-party AI. Let's start with the M365 Copilot and Copilot chat. Right, again, a lot of the stuff that you guys have seen, you have a policy that says confidential information cannot be given to the Copilot. Somebody says, review this doc for me, it's marked as highly confidential, it won't happen. Blocks, again, the stuff works already, you guys are aware of it. Now, Purview is adding another very interesting capability for inline protection, right? So imagine in the prompt, somebody sort of typed in a credit card number or anything that's considered PII information or confidential information. We are able to detect that inline and apply the DLP policies to sort of protect them, right? This is going to be a substantial change, especially when you think about, M365 Copilot chat, where accidentally you don't want this information to go to a web grounding index. whether it's Bing or anything else, the protection of your prompts and responses, and we're starting with the prompt. Super excited about this. This is a huge customer ask that we're very excited to go launch. And then finally, again, going back to you saw the information workers view, right? And now you essentially look at, in the Microsoft 365 admin center, you're the IT person or the IT leader who wants to get a sense of, hey, what kind of sensitive information has been found? Like, what are the apps doing? Right now, you see this source code, their social security numbers, credit card. A lot of this view is coming from the protection, from the insights that they're getting from Purview. We're just channeling it to what the IT admin leaders. And the reason we have sort of thought about this approach, and I'll sort of keep talking about it, is because what we believe is eventually users having the right visibility, of course, the data security admins doing the protection and giving the right visibility to IT is going to create that trust and that workflow, which is going to increase the adoption of these AI apps. And the same thing, this thing, as you look at the locations, it's not just valid for M365 Copilot, but it's valid for Copilot Chat, where if you look at the order of magnitude of usage of Copilot Chat is going to be significantly more, and also where things like inline protection become very important, because a lot of what you give in your prompt goes out to the web to sort of get augmented in the model. We're focused heavily on the developer community, and now why is that? Like, look, the reality is there is going to be lots and lots, whether it's low code or pro code, AI agents or AI apps. There's just millions and millions of these that are going to be built out in the enterprises over the next few years. I mean, that's a given, right? A lot of the innovation. The other thing we've realized is for developers, you've got to really make it easy. I mean, they're always focused on the value, right? So in some sense, compliance, governance, security is not very top of mind. So the approach we've taken over here is, in a lot of the maker platforms that we have within Microsoft, so you look at AI Foundry, you look at Copilot Studio, how do you basically get this value deeply integrated? So let's quickly go. Now you see in Foundry, in the Foundry control plane, we are already deeply integrated with Purview. So literally, you're a developer using Foundry or an admin using Foundry, you see Purview, and like, what does this give you? This integration gives you a deep understanding of like, what are the models that are using sensitive data? You basically have a sense of how many user risky interactions that you're seeing in your app across all these agents, and what is the kind of sensitive data, like how much of it is highly sensitive, medium sensitive, low risk, et cetera. So the reason this is important, the reason we are embedding this is we want the developers to have a very good understanding as they are building their app, when they do their testing, to sort of be prepared and see this, it's sort of in the face. And so they're able to adjust that, right? And a lot of the integrations we've done, so if you're building an app on Foundry or Copilot Studio as an example, Purview is already, you can sort of turn on Purview, and all the protections that you see in like M365 Copilot apply to all the apps and agents that are built on these stacks. So whether there's a prompt where you sort of send the same credit card information that I showed you about inline protection, all that value accrues. I'll give you a few examples. So introducing Compliance Manager for eval. So this is, like being compliant with AI apps is super important. Here, essentially what you see, again, deeply integrated with the AI Foundry. So as a developer, I'm able to see, like, hey, as I'm building out the app, as I'm testing it, and I'm going through my deployment process, how is my app behaving with respect to, the compliance expectations that are there in my enterprise? So violent information, hate stuff, self-harm, indirect attacks. Purview already, if you look at the Purview compliance services that we have, they already get this information. What we had to do was integrate it with Foundry. So the moment that got turned on, right, for the app, basically the developers start getting this protection for free. And now, by the way, on the Purview side, as you expect, right, so you see that in Foundry's control plane. So the developers are very proactively informed about fix your stuff before you deploy anything in production. And of course, on the Purview side, the compliance admin gets real-time information about what are the apps that are being built. They may not be deployed yet, but in Foundry, that you can sort of react to. In this case, of course, they're all passing, which is great. But if there is any concern that somebody is building an AI app that's not compliant, then you can sort of react to it very quickly. The same thing with communication compliance, right? This seems like a pretty, you guys have seen this before in M365 Copilot. You have, an agent that essentially somebody's reaching out to and saying, hey, can you summarize, give me the credit card numbers. Of course, it's a violation of, communication compliance policies, but this is not happening in M365. It's happening on an app that's been built on agent, and the developer had to do nothing, right? They just turned on Purview based on the integrations we did, and all the protections that you're very used to that happen with M365, Copilot, Chat, and Teams, etc., now are basically applying to the apps that are built on Foundry. Isn't that fantastic? Like the developers had to do nothing. Right? It just works. And the same thing, you try to, in this case, the example that you see is now the user's trying to actually jailbreak the prompt using prompt injection. And that, of course, foundationally, Purview's compliance is able to catch all of that and works for these apps as well. And again, you look at the compliance portal, all of the stuff will be in DSPM. You see exactly what were the interactions that were considered risky. And so the compliance admin has very, very clear view of that. Purview plus Fabric. Again, Fabric is another platform that is becoming extremely strategic to build all these apps. We have deeply integrated Fabric and Purview, again, very similar to Foundry. So Fabric Copilot, Power BI being the big one here, essentially any sort of prompts that you're sending inside Power BI are effectively visible in DSPM to the Purview admins as well. So if you have enterprise, if in your enterprise you've deployed Fabric and you want to sort of make sure that you're able to protect the data inside Fabric through Purview, that integration is already done for you. The same thing, yeah, you basically see that. The same thing, we are working with GitHub. And it's been pretty interesting for us how many customers have come and said, like, look, GitHub is not just a source control system or an app development platform for us. We store a lot of highly confidential information. So based on that signal, very, very similar to the other integrations we've done, GitHub is going to be, Purview is going to be very deeply integrated with GitHub. And here's the example that you see where any prompt, like, let's say a developer goes and sort of, all the prompts essentially get captured and get surfaced inside data security posture management. Again, hopefully, it's sort of becoming clear. DSPM is going to become your one-stop shop for getting really, really rich insights of what's happening across AI and data access inside your enterprise. Now, moving on to data security and governance piece. This is the other part that I said were the data security leaders. They want to use AI to get better, right? There are two roles. If you look at from a data security standpoint, this is how we sort of draw out the mental frame. You have what we call the posture role, essentially, where you have that admin who's proactively looking at all the policies that exist. Are they working or not? This is even before an incident happens, right? Looking at, hey, what are the alerts? Should we need to fine-tune some of this stuff? So there's work around that. And then, of course, there's a security analyst who's looking at the alerts, looking at incidents and essentially triaging them. We are basically creating agents for both of these roles, right? And one of the things I'm super, happy is if you look at the data that we've sort of gotten, it supports our research, thought process over here. 36% of the alerts never get triaged, and you really don't know whether the ones that you're leaving on are the important ones. On an average, enterprises spend about $50,000 to actually go through and triage these per month. And some of the larger ones spend a lot more. And it takes about 21 minutes of staff time to actually go through an alert. Now, just put that into perspective. This is just with humans. When you sort of get into agents that are working 24/7, 365 nonstop, right? Just look at the volume of alerts you're going to generate. I mean, it's just going to become impossible for just human practitioners to get through this. Very excited to announce the GA of Data Security Triage Agent. Some of you may be already using it. It's just been amazing. We use this in Microsoft extensively. So what does it do? It basically looks at the text and prioritizes the alerts for you and tells you, like, look, these are the 4 things of the hundreds that you have that you need to focus on. And the reason we are able to do that is because text analytics is the most important way in which you can create this priority. And that's what the LLMs are great at, right? So basically, we are fine-tuning the models just to sort of get them to understand the relevant data that we have that matters for data security, and this is something that we feel very confident about. And how does it decide? Like, what are the aspects it looks at? Is the sensitivity risk of the alert, exfiltration risk, policy risks. So this is the frame. We are doing a lot of evals to track the quality of the results that we get, and it's showing a lot of promise. Love to hear the feedback from the community on how this works out. We are extending this agent, by the way, so it doesn't just triage the alert and tell you, like in this particular case, it found sensitive information that somebody accessed. The agent basically created a Teams message and sent it to the user who accessed the file which had sensitive information and said, hey, look, this is what I found. You need to remediate by redacting this sensitive information. And it sort of gets into a loop till this thing happens. So you see like how, I mean, this is just the start of how slowly we're basically adding value where you can imagine if you're a data security practitioner, how that sort of helps you over time with this agents running. Super excited. Thank you. For the lone person who's excited about this stuff. Hopefully the others are and they're just digesting this. Excited about introducing the data security posture agent. So this is the proactive side that I spoke about of the job, where you're sort of looking at, hey, is my estate set up well? In this case, Project Nebula, the data security admin knows it's a highly confidential project, so you can basically ask the agent, hey, tell me all the roadmap items, the product details, all the specs that are associated with this confidential project, because I, as the admin, want to know, are they labeled properly or not, right? And when these things come back, the agent will say, hey, look, I know some of these things are not marked properly. Would you like me to change the labels? All that the admin has to say is, yes, go do it. And that labels get applied. And then you get, inside your Asset Explorer, you get a ton of information, about things, which are very relevant, right, on the, to sort of, fix on the posture side. And then you can sort of interactively work with the agent to get this done. So this is just a start. We're basically going to learn from a lot of the usage that we see on these, but the goal is to sort of keep improving these to make sure that the efficiency, because of the world we are moving towards, is going to be like several orders of magnitude higher in terms of these alerts that we receive, and we're sort of going to get very prepared for that. How many of you love regulatory compliance stuff, looking at all the documents? I didn't think so. Look, the thing that I'm excited about, the value we're adding is, this is just an example of EU AI Act. We're just going to make it very simple. You upload the PDF document, check this out, right? You got the doc, you upload the PDF doc, and how about the controls based on per chapter of the PDF doc that are sort of given to you? And all this analysis in the background was done by the LLM, right? Now you can imagine, in the future, you can imagine an agent over here essentially not just showing you, but actually, getting all the controls implemented as well. To the final chapter now, you look at, I spoke about the unified approach with Microsoft Sentinel. Of course, like lots and lots of tools, the cost of, data breaches in millions of dollars, and we have lots of signal. We just need to sort of pull it together to create a lot of value. And this approach essentially has enabled us to have Purview protect all these surfaces, M365 devices, data estates, copilots, AI apps and agents, and third-party stacks, right? The big news at Ignite is we used to have DSPM for Purview, and then we had DSPM for AI, the AI and non-AI data. We've sort of come to the conclusion, look, that really doesn't hold. Over a period of time, AI is going to look at all pieces of data, every data. So this is the whole ways in which we've thought about the difference doesn't hold. So there's one unified DSPM experience. And as you can see, we're basically consolidating Purview insights through all the integrations that we've done, right? So remember, when you start off, the one thing if you want to take away from this presentation is start with DSPM, because we are putting all the value for you to understand data security, governance, and compliance right there, right? So there's a lot of stuff in terms of insights in the unified thing we are very excited about. Super excited about introducing the partner ecosystem for DSPM. This is the first time we have done this. And the reason for that is very simple. Look, building out deep understanding of various data sources in terms of evaluating risk is very hard. Right? This is not a trivial thing. I can tell you, just the team in discussions with them, working, getting this right for Foundry, Fabric, Copilot Studio, GitHub, itself is a lot of work. So here's where I'm very excited. Thank you to BigID, Cyera, OneTrust, and Varonis. These are the first set of partners for DSPM. So BigID is helping us with deeply understanding Databricks. Cyera is helping us with deeply understanding Snowflake. OneTrust with the Google Cloud Platform, and Varonis with Salesforce. Now, what this means for you as an end customer. Look, we'll do the product integration, amazing partnerships, all the go-to-market will work out. But now as a customer, when you look at DSPM, it's not just the Microsoft assets that I spoke about, right? Our reach in terms of you understanding your risk is going to be very comprehensive across your entire estate, which is pretty amazing. So really excited about that. This is just a start. We're going to work with many, many more partners. Like I said, our vision really with DSPM is it's your one-stop shop for understanding the data security risk. Think about it. With this integration, all the stuff that I showed about with M365 data, Foundry data, this and that for risks, you see that with Snowflake, you see that with Databricks, you see that with Salesforce, Google Cloud, Google Workspaces, and we'll keep expanding that, right? So this is your investments in Purview, all the work you've done with investments, setting out the right policies are going to expand eventually to sort of protect data in these environments as well. And finally, so that, by the way, was the whole journey. I know it was like a breeze going through a lot of new work that's landing. There's a lot of deep sessions that I encourage you to go watch. But I want to talk about the security dashboard for AI, right? So this is really an investment where we're sort of stepping back and saying, look, today when you want to understand your AI risk, there is a lot of deep information that you get across various tools. So identity with 𝗕𝗏, Defender, Intune, Purview for data. But if you're a CISO, if you're like one of the security leaders and you just want to have a very good view of the posture of your entire estate, data, identity, like your containers, your virtual machines, your network, in one single view, and eventually with time, like understanding what the correlations are, that's the vision behind the security dashboard for AI, right? So here, as you can imagine, you basically get the inventory view from 𝗕𝗏, so like how many agents, and you essentially understand, hey, what are the misconfigured parts that lead to attacks, right? What are the attack paths that have sort of come, right? That visibility comes inside this dashboard. Of course, you've spoken a lot about the sensitive data interactions. You can see the identity and access risk associated with all the agents. Right? You can essentially understand, of course, data security risks. You understand your cloud security risks. So basically, what we've sort of done is we are sort of collecting signal, not just from Purview, of course, but across all the assets that we have with Microsoft. And you can imagine this extends with the partner ecosystem as well, right? And the idea really over here is what's the high-level view that we provide to CISO's team, the compliance leaders team, the data governance leaders team, in a way in which they can get a very good end-to-end view of the risk that they carry. So security.ai.microsoft.com, or I forget, ai.security.microsoft.com, one of these URLs is really where you sort of have to get this started. This is another place where we believe there is going to be a lot of value and a lot of traction. So super, super excited about that. Like eventually what I'd say is, the closing slide before I invite Nick over here in a second to have a fireside chat where, if you look at securing AI, it really boils down to securing your data. Like I said, a lot of the other attack vectors, people just don't like attacking and getting into a VM and doing nothing, right? That's not the goal. Like eventually you want to understand how to reach, if you're a threat actor, you want to understand how to reach the most important assets in an enterprise, which are your data assets. And so that's one of the reasons why we take our responsibility very seriously. Again, heartfelt thanks to all of you for doing such a fantastic job in being our customers, our partners, giving us the feedback. Thank you to everyone in the partner ecosystem who's joined us and I know there's other discussions going on as well, because we are essentially going to make sure that we do this in a very comprehensive end-to-end manner, not just with Microsoft, but across the entire estate. But with that, let me invite Nick on the stage. Please welcome Nick, who's the VP of Engineering and Security Risk at the Ford Motor Company. Please take a seat, Nick. And so our team has been working with Nick in sort of getting Purview deployed as they're sort of increasing their ambitions for AI. So just a set of questions. So you heard the talk, Nick. I'm just sort of curious, when you think about what's top of mind for you, does this resonate? Like, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks for having me today, Rohan. So, really securing data is really a critical challenge for many organizations and enterprises that are kind of dealing with it. It extends beyond just data loss, but making sure we can enhance innovation, enable collaboration, and kind of support AI-assisted productivity in a secure manner across our organization. So one of the biggest challenges is data is now everywhere. Data is in the cloud, data is in your data center, data is in SaaS, and now with AI, it introduces new risk and complexity. So really, as a security leader, you kind of think of what kind of controls do you have in place to kind of protect that type of data. And what I really kind of want to make sure you first focus on is visibility. Do you understand where the sensitive data is across your enterprise? Next key component is identity. Identity is key to AI, key to how do you protect the data, because it's now not just protecting users, but also protecting the AI agents that you're creating and making sure that it has the same security boundary as the user has. And then, AI enables collaboration. So making sure that you have the appropriate protection in place to protect that data that is used in the AI models that we create. And then lastly, AI is a huge, huge enabler for many organizations, but you need to have new security controls in place to either protect the content and making sure that the AIs that we're building does not overly expose user access and get them access to data that they shouldn't.
No, it totally resonates, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of folks in the audience as well. And the identity point you mentioned is very key. So I'm just curious, Nick, like you've been on this journey with Purview now with us for a while. How has the experience been?
It's been good, right? So we have transitioned from our old technology stack last year and kind of migrated to Purview on really kind of the biggest value as we looked at modernizing our security stack with Purview is leveraging really labeling and classifying our data, right? Because this is just really critical from understanding where our risk is across the landscape, and especially as it relates to AI. The other component from an information risk management perspective, with IRM, you have just controls that you can put into labeling documents, and then tying the appropriate encryption and access controls tied to the data. So when it kind of gets shared across the organization or outside the organization, those controls still stay with the document. And then lastly, but most critically, as we talk about AI, is data security posture management. Making sure that we understand the kind of is there any exposure that's happening with Purview? You potentially can see if there's any additional monitoring and control of the data that gets shared with the AI, and how do you manage the potential risk that's tied to that data?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that part of like managing risk by preventing oversharing is super important. One of the things we've learned in partnership with Ford is, there's a company that really believes in a lot in looking at like how do you make things efficient, and when it comes to your data security program, Nick, can you share, how much is the ecosystem play that we're going on important to sort of in the way you're looking at things?
Yeah, so we've come to the realization of relying on fragmented collection of tools across our landscape introduces a lot of complexity, complexity introduces risk and a lot of administrative overhead. So we've taken the strategy to go away from fragmented solutions and really adopting an ecosystem of a fully unified platform and ecosystem. So with the adoption of Microsoft E5 and Purview ecosystem, we've seen the complexity reduction. And then even huge announcement today with the Microsoft Security Copilot, moving our data to either Sentinel or using Copilot capabilities really has enabled our security organization to be more nimble and efficient in protecting the company.
That's fantastic to hear, and I think that's the story that we hear with a lot of customers in terms of, hey, this plethora of tools, how do we break down silos? When you look at these emerging technologies like AI agents and all the stuff that you heard today, like how do you see that impacting your data security and risk strategy in the future?
So AI just really accelerates information movement across the organization, which has huge, huge value, but it also introduces significant risk because now AI can expose sensitive data a lot faster than humans ever can. So you need a kind of different proactive model. So just look at the world that we're living on with AI agents today. Previously you only had to focus on what potentially Nick had access to. But now you need to be able to look at, the agent that is working on behalf of Nick. Is it have this social security controlled boundaries that Nick has, or is it exposing unnecessary data? The other component is from a information from a data security posture management perspective, is making sure that we continuously kind of monitor and protect versus relying on periodic reviews. And that is critical to making sure that there's no data leakage that is happening within the company.
No, that's very important. This is where you want DSPM to sort of tell you the things which are risks that are getting built up versus going and looking for it. Like that's the expectation, which is what we're hearing from a lot of our customers. And finally, like thank you for sharing. Like, how has your journey with M365 Copilot been? Like, how are you guys thinking about it?
Yeah, so Copilot is a critical, very powerful tool. It can quickly find information across your organization, but it introduces risk, as I kind of previously mentioned, right? So it introduces the ability to, are you potentially exposing more information to the user that they previously didn't know they potentially had? So, data classification and data labeling is critical. Knowing, if your AI, because that kind of automatically gets embedded into Security Copilot. Also, again, DSPM, be able to find kind of threats that are happening within your ecosystem, and making sure that you kind of manage that access management is critical for how you deploy kind of your agents.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Nick.
Yep.
It's great for you to sort of come and share the insights with our audience over here. And I think your journey is very similar to what all of you are going through. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And that was it. For this session. I just have like a final slide that talks about a lot of the deep dive sessions that are happening. Again, thank you again for all the support, all the trust you've faced, and hopefully you got a good sense of how deep we're going with protecting AI and expanding, the investments that you've already made with Purview to sort of serve you a lot better, so you can focus on doing the right thing for your customers. I hope you have a fantastic Ignite. Thank you so much.